going? And welcome back to another episode of Mood for Feud. I'm your host Katya, and today we're going to be covering probably one of the most topical feuds that we've ever covered. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit intimidated by this just because I feel like we don't have the full story yet, but I've just been so consumed with all the internet drama and speculations and little nuggets of information that have been coming out in the internet, and so I couldn't wait. Like, I really just wanted to talk about it while it was all fresh and in the front of my mind, and maybe some of my takes will age like milk, like we'll see, you know. So it's a bit of a new experience for me. What were your first thoughts when the It Ends With Us press drama started bubbling up in the internet? I will be honest with you guys, I was feeling kind of smug when all of this hate started turning on Blake Lively, and I've been doing some reflecting on this, okay, because usually I'm not one to hate for women. In fact, I am like the other way, where I defend women to a fault. If a woman commits a crime, I'm like, okay, but who drove her to do that? So it was odd for me how gleeful I was watching the internet turn on this woman, and I was like, what is going on? Why am I feeling this way? You know, maybe it's because of my internalized misogyny. Okay, yeah, that could be it. But like I said, typically I don't find myself in a position where I'm hating on a woman. And then I'm like, maybe it's because I'm jealous, you know? It could be some of that tall poppy syndrome type of shit, where I'm seeing a successful woman and then I just get this inner urge to tear her down. But again, it just doesn't really seem like something I would do. And then I was thinking, you know, the reason I actually think why I was feeling this way is because Blake Lively is so very representative of everything that's wrong with Hollywood, particularly in this day and age. And I think this is what really makes her the perfect villain. And I'll elaborate on this a little bit more, but you know, she's rich. She's incredibly wealthy. She comes from a good family background as well. Her family had strong ties to the entertainment industry, so she's a nepo baby. She's also like picture perfect and just the face of Hollywood and capitalism and everything that's really wrong with the system. She's got this rich, white, perfect husband, and the two of them have like a million side hustles. You know, they're really heavily contributing to the capitalism machine. They're constantly pushing the next product down our throat, especially Ryan Reynolds. He's so deep into that Marvel universe, which has been coming under fire for basically churning out content for money without actually checking that the content is first quality. And it almost feels like people have been waiting for this moment where we can turn on her, right? And it shows, by the way, that as soon as this drama between her and Justin Baldoni dropped in the internet, immediately all of these old interviews and stories of Blake being not a very nice person, or times where she was really short with an interviewer, or times where she was just downright rude and refusing to answer questions, or, you know, stories of people that have met her in real life or have worked with her on set. Suddenly all of these things were coming out of the woodworks, and they definitely helped escalate this feud and make it seem a bit bigger, or make it seem like there were more people hating on Blake than maybe is fair for the feud. So I had to try really hard to just make sure that when I was writing up this episode, because, you know, I don't want this to be a Blake Lively hate train. Like, I don't think that's fair. I do want to hold her accountable, and I think there are some very key concrete things that we can hold her accountable for, but I don't want to just kind of sit here and completely tear her down. So I'm going to try to really just focus on the feud and what's been happening relevant to this press tour. As always, in true Mood for Feud fashion, we're going to take a little deep dive into Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni's backgrounds. Let's find out who these people are, where they came from, and then I'm also, for anyone who doesn't know, the movie It Ends With Us is of course based on the best-selling book by Colleen Hoover. So I'm just going to give a little background into the book It Ends With Us as well, because there were already a bunch of controversies when this book first came out that are just kind of adding fuel to the fire. And then we'll obviously get onto the feud. So let's start with Blake Lively. Blake Lively was actually born Blake Allender Brown God, that's a pretty name. Blake Allender Brown. She was born August 25th, 1987, and this makes her a Virgo, and she was also born in LA. Now, as I've mentioned, her family was involved in the Hollywood entertainment industry. So her mom, Elaine, worked as a talent scout, and then her father, Ernie Brown, which that's where her, surname comes from, although he later took on the last name Lively when he married Blake's mom. He was an actor, and Blake and her brother Eric also use Lively, the surname, as their stage name, and I feel like the reason behind this could possibly be to quite clearly tie them together with the siblings that they have from their mum's previous marriage. So the whole Lively family is very prominent in the entertainment industry. All of Blake's siblings are actors, and fun fact, or at least I found this fun, her sister, Robin Lively, is married to the guy who plays the coach / Troy's dad in High School Musical. The guy who's like, what the hell are those two doing in a tree? I guess that would make him Blake's brother-in-law. Blake recalls that growing up, she would quite often go to these acting classes that her parents taught. They didn't want to leave her at home with a babysitter, so they would just bring her along. And this meant that she was very familiar with a lot of acting techniques and acting exercises from a very young age. And then Blake's dad, Ernie, he's the one who gives Blake her very first acting role when she is just 10 years old in a 1998 film that he is directing titled Sandman. When I say Nepo, you say baby. Actually, the whole Sandman film was a bit of a who you know deal. So like I mentioned, it was directed by Blake's dad. It featured Blake. It also featured her siblings Laurie and Eric Lively. And then it was written by Don LaFontaine, which that name might ring a bell for you because he's the guy who does all the before he passed, all the movie trailer voices. The guy who's like, in a world where men fight beasts or whatever, that guy, that was Don LaFontaine. So he was the writer on that film. And then the movie also featured his daughters, Lacey LaFontaine and Sky LaFontaine. So I feel like the whole project was a bit of a family affair. And Blake describes having a pretty good childhood. Like in a Marie Claire article from 2008, she recalls that her mum would quite often take her to Disneyland like twice a week. So she just has very good memories of almost growing up at Disneyland because that's how often she would go. I know, I'm trying so hard not to be jealous right now. And then in the weekends, her mom would allow her to stay up as late as she want. She was like a bit of a night owl, and so her and her mom would just stay up and talk, and her mom would tell her all these cool stories about Hollywood. And yeah, so like Disneyland and no bedtime, which is basically every young kid's dream. Now in 2018, Backgrid released some yearbook photos from Blake's high school, and let me tell you right now, she was the OG that girl. There's a whole page in the yearbook that's purely just dedicated to her and her high school boyfriend. It's like very much giving prom queen and king. She was also the class president. She was on the cheer team. She was an honor student. I mean, she was like an IRL Veronica Lodge from Riverdale, for lack of a better comparison. There was also another page that was purely dedicated to her girl group, I guess you could say, her and her friends. They had a little name for their friend group. It was BBMAK, which is the initials of their first names. And this photo collage, it's super wholesome. Like you can see that these girls have grown up together, throughout their schooling life, obviously. But there's also photos of them when they're kids. Like this little collage alone could have been her audition for Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants because it's really giving off that energy. So she obviously lived that in real life as well. There's photos of her with her first car, and again, it's not your average first car, and it just really looks like she had everybody's dream high school experience. And of course, these yearbook photos, they're not going to paint the whole picture. I'm sure that there was also bad shit happening in her life as well, but I think it's important to remember when we look into this feud and when we're talking about Blake Lively, we're not talking about your average person here. We're talking about someone who had a very unconventional high school experience. Right off the bat, she is living a life that potentially has a skewed perspective on reality. She's not having the classic upbringing of your average Joe. Now in 2005, which is her final year of school, the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants comes out, and this is her breakthrough role, and she's playing Bridget. And her dad actually plays her dad in the film as well. So that's pretty cool. She got to act alongside him and they got to do this project together. And I mean, everyone wanted to be Bridget from the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Again, like, she has this really cool girl, like it girl, that girl, whatever you want to call it. She has that factor to her that makes people want to be like her. I remember that iconic scene where she's like running onto the football field. She takes her cap off and then all of her hair just like tumbles out perfectly, and everyone watched that and was just like, God damn it, she is beautiful. And then, you know, everyone at my school wanted to be Bridget. Except for me, obviously. I wanted to be Lena because, you know, I wasn't like other girls. I even got my mom to buy me a fucking sketchbook, which I have to preface this by saying I cannot draw for shit. Like, I am the least talented person when it comes to sketching, but because I wanted to be like Lena so bad, I got my mum to buy me this sketchbook so I could like sit in my garden in New Plymouth and sketch and pretend that this is remotely the same as Lena sitting in the gorgeous landscapes of Greece and sketching. But I think if you were normal, you probably wanted to be Bridget. I can totally see why. Blake Lively does have this very enigmatic and charismatic quality to her that makes her so mesmerizing on screen. So despite her Nepo baby upbringing, I do think it's fitting that she has this career as an actor. Now in 2007, that's when Gossip Girl comes out, and you know, even though Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants really like popped off in my primary school, this role is what really made her a household name, because this TV show ran for 6 seasons till 2012, and it was hitting a different demographic to Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants potentially. It was just a bit more widespread, and I feel like it's the role, you know, Serena van der Woodsen, that's still a name that people are talking about to this day. It's like a role that had longevity, that's really in the pop culture zeitgeist. Now in 2010, her and Ryan Reynolds are in Green Lantern together, and this is also where the two would meet. And Ryan at the time was married to Scarlett Johansson, but separated shortly after meeting Blake on Green Lantern. Sussy sus. And then Blake also breaks up with Penn Badgley, her Gossip Girl co-star, who she was seeing at the time. Again, sussy sus sus. Now, if you enjoy blind items, you'll know that there is a ton that allege that Ryan and Blake actually got together on the set of Green Lantern, which I think timing wise just makes a whole lot of sense, and then especially with how quickly they were to both drop their respective partners around the exact same time. It's very much like Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibes. But if you're not into the blind items, you might choose to subscribe to the story that Ryan and Blake give to the media, which is that they met on a double date where they were both, you know, they'd actually come with other people, like they weren't dating each other in this scenario, but that then their chemistry was just so off the charts that they left their dates kind of in the dust, and they were just constantly firing all these friendly flirty banter at one another. And then after that they started seeing one another, which again, that would obviously, if they're both double dating, that would be after Scarlett and Penn Badgley, so maybe that's when they started dating. But to me, that timeline just isn't timelining. They got together, so I would say relatively soon after Green Lantern, and so I just feel like there wasn't time to be doing all these double dates anyway. So Blake and Ryan have 4 children, and I would describe their relationship as one that really appeals to like maybe the middle-aged demographic. You know, they're very well known for doing these little roast posts where Blake will post a photo of like Ryan standing next to another guy and be like, shout out to the most handsome man I've ever met. Oh, and my husband Ryan's in the photo. Or he'll post a photo of like him and Blake, but Blake's face is like half cropped out, and he'll be like, my favorite photo of me and my wife. Like, they have this very like bantery interaction on the internet, I guess, which to a certain group will really appeal, and you know, they're just Hollywood's little darlings, and it's all very cutesy. I've unfortunately read one too many gossip items on to enjoy their relationship. And I guess the TLDR is that, now again, allegedly, Ryan is incredibly controlling, and he doesn't love when Blake is working on projects that he's not involved in. And, you know, he prefers that, like, if it were up to him, she would basically just stay at home, raise their kids, and not do anything in the entertainment industry. So that's what the gossip items say. It's not concrete, it's gossip, but I think it does tie in nicely into the relationship we see between Blake and Ryan as this feud is playing out as well. Now, since doing Gossip Girl, like, she's done the odd film here and there, but for some reason she's managed to stay incredibly relevant and a household name. And I don't know what is this witchcraft, because when I think of Blake Lively, I'm like, yes, she's a very prolific actor. Like, of course she's managed to stay so relevant. I feel like she's someone who never looks out of place on a red carpet. She's a Met Gala staple. But then I was trying to think, what movies has she been in? And, you know, it's like Green Lantern, Age of Adeline, A Simple Favor, and then what else? Every other project has either been very minimal or there just hasn't been other movies. So I don't know how she manages to stay such an A-list Hollywood name without actually ever really starring in anything. Like, is it her relationship with Ryan Reynolds? Is it her friendship with Taylor Swift? Like, I don't know. I don't know how she does it. Now, before we start talking about Justin Baldoni, I do want to talk about some of Blake's side hustles, because there have been some kind of weird ones. So in 2014, she starts a lifestyle website called Preserve, which I think is meant to be similar to what Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop website is, where it's like a guide on what's fashionable at the moment, you know, what to buy, her favorite products that she buys and you can buy too, that kind of thing. And people are very quick to point out when this site comes out that a lot of her style guides and blogs have this weird fixation on Southern America pre-Civil War times, which is just odd. It's especially odd because Blake herself isn't from the South. Like, she doesn't have that kind of family connection there, or she didn't grow up there. Do you know what I mean? And then I think her most infamous spread on Preserve was titled Allure of the Antebellum. Yeah, already the name is like not great, but this is how the piece started. It said, the term Southern Belle came to fruition during the antebellum period, prior to the Civil War, acknowledging women with an inherent social distinction who set the standards for style and appearance. These women epitomized Southern hospitality with a cultivation of beauty and grace, but even more with a captivating and magnetic sensibility. Like, what the fuck did I just read? Inherent social distinction? Like, inherent because they were white and fucking slave owners? It was just, the whole thing was just, the tone wasn't right. Do you know what I mean? It was glamorizing a very disgusting time in history and then focusing on like the wrong areas as well. Like, the whole thing was just a bit yuck. And unsurprisingly, Blake did shut the website down a couple years later, basically saying that what the website was like giving wasn't what she wanted it to give. She didn't use that very 2024 language at the time, but that was basically what she was saying. But this allure of the antebellum also bleeds into her personal life. In 2012, Blake and Ryan very infamously got married on a plantation. Now, they did issue an apology for this many years later when, you know, people started to dig this up, saying what we saw at the time was a wedding venue on Pinterest. What we saw after was a place built upon devastating tragedy. But the venue was literally called Boone Hall Plantation, so it's like you can't really miss what this place is when you go to book it. And it featured things like a row of original slave cabins, which was referred to as Slave Street. And it's just so icky to think that they got married there. It's like, this should be a site where you go to get educated, to learn about history, and to like fucking pay respect to those who suffered there. But getting married there is fucking cooked. Like, would you get married in a concentration camp if they were a little bit more aesthetically pleasing? No, you wouldn't. But I guess they did apologize, so whatever, you know. And the reason I'm bringing this and Preserve up, it's not to like, again, I don't want to join the Blake hate train, whatever, or try to slaughter her for past mistakes that she's since apologized for. I want to bring this up because I think it really emphasizes that historically she is an ignorant person when it comes to things like social issues. And I don't think this is necessarily malicious on her part, but I do think it's deeply, deeply ignorant which is easy to believe when we think about her upbringing. You know, again, very different to your average person's upbringing. And so it's unsurprising to me that she is severely out of touch, and alarm bells don't immediately start going off when she's booking something called a plantation as her wedding venue, or writing an article about how glamorous the women of the pre-Civil War era were. Now, some of her other side projects include Betty Booze, which is a sparkling gourmet cocktail type thing in a can, in other words, an RTD. And this is a bit of an odd business move for Blake, because she's very open about the fact that she does not drink alcohol herself and that she doesn't like the way alcohol makes her feel. So some of her fans were very disappointed with this business venture and just felt like it wasn't something that was authentic to her, although she kind of played it off as she's a very good hostess, and so she likes to have stuff that, you know, she might not drink, but her guests would enjoy. And then very recently, as in like a couple weeks ago, she also launched Blake Brown, which is an homage to her birth name. And this is a hair care line, and we'll talk more about Betty Booze and Blake Brown when we get to the feud. Okay, let's talk about Justin Baldoni. So Justin Louis Baldoni was born January 24th, 1984, and this makes him an Aquarius. And he was born in LA, same as Blake, but he was raised in Oregon. His dad is a business consultant, but he has also, since Justin started working in the entertainment industry, he has also worked on some of Justin's film projects. So I'm not sure if he's still a business consultant. And I'll just level with you guys, it was incredibly tricky to find information about Justin Baldoni. I mean, his Wikipedia page alone is like a pamphlet. There's just not that much about his early upbringing on the internet. Definitely not when we compare it to someone like Blake Lively. To find out what his dad's job is, I literally had to go to his LinkedIn. Anyway, and then Justin's mom is a feng shui consultant, and Justin is very open about how close he is with both his parents and how supportive they've been of his career in entertainment. In high school, Justin never saw himself being in the entertainment industry. He was very into track and soccer, and he even went to college on like a partial sports scholarship, but then he later dropped out. And he was also a disc jockey for a local radio station while he was in high school. So how did he transition to pursue acting? Well, he met a manager who advised him that he should pursue it and that he'd be really good at it one day when he was moving into an apartment building. And Justin has said that he never really considered himself an actor, and if anything, he was more interested in filmmaking or producing, directing, more of that kind of behind the scenes, behind the camera stuff. Yeah, I think we do see that in his career as well. He's been very involved in more of that production side of filmmaking as well as acting. Like I said, I haven't been able to find a ton of information on this man, but the info I have found paint him as a fucking saint. And of course, I am immediately sus. Because when I tell you, it seems too good to be true. Okay, let's just go through it. So he has for quite some time now been very vocal about being a feminist and about wanting to use media and the entertainment industry to make a positive impact on social issues by raising awareness and, you know, spreading information and educating people on different topics. So in 2012, he created a digital documentary series called My Last Days, and this show centered on people living with terminal illnesses. And it became so popular that the second season actually aired on CW. And then following the success of this docuseries, he used his profits to co-found Wayfarer Studios, which is an entertainment studio that strives to debunk the typical studio model by championing inspirational stories which unite as true agents for social change. So again, we've got that philosophy of his, of, you know, using media to ignite change for positive impacts. In 2014, he has his breakout role playing Rafael Solano in Jane the Virgin. And this is probably what most people would recognize him from or know him from. And he was on this show until 2019. And he gained a lot of stardom by starring on this show. And so he really used, the increase in fame to work on projects that platform social issues. He also explained that his role in Jane the Virgin really taught him a lot about diversity and inclusion. He said, "Our show was truly intersectionality. Privilege is blind to those who have it. I didn't even recognize my own bias sometimes, so I'm glad I got these opportunities. In 2017, he started a panel series titled Man Enough, which was all about taking a look at men's role in society and talking about fatherhood, body image, marriage, and feminism. And then he later transitioned Man Enough to a podcast which is still going on to this day and is described as a podcast that explores what it means to be a man today and how rigid gender roles have affected all people. The show creates a safe environment for a range of perspectives, exploring how the messages of masculinity show up in relationships, body image, privilege, fatherhood, sex, success, mental health, and so much more. And I've scrolled through some of the episodes, and disclaimer, I haven't listened to any of them, but his most recent one is about men supporting women in leadership. He's got an episode on consent. He's got an episode about men's role in holding each other accountable, creating positive and healthy relationships. He's got one on male privilege, and he said that his biggest goal with this podcast is not to demonize men and masculinity, but to open up a space where men can learn, grow, and improve. What did I say? Saint or what? Like, this is so important. There aren't enough people doing this kind of work, right? Like, we've got too many fucking Andrew Tates in the world that are all about alpha male and blah blah blah. But he's here, like, if his episodes are good, like, this is positive, progressive work that we need men to be doing. And it's even better when it comes from a man, or when it's a man championing this kind of growth, because people like to say like feminism is a women's topic, but it's not. Like, it's a people's topic, and so it seems like a really cool project. And then in 2017, he also directed and produced the film 5 Feet Apart, which is about teenagers living with cystic fibrosis. And he was very inspired when he did his digital docu-series on people with terminal illness. He met someone who had cystic fibrosis, and he was very inspired by their story, and so he wanted to make a film that platformed people living with cystic fibrosis. And he actually worked very closely with the couple that he met through his docu-series, and would invite them on set so they could watch the scenes that he was directing and give him feedback on, is this accurate? Is this a proper portrayal? So he's very open to inviting other people's perspectives on the work he does. He's also done, I'm not even done, guys. He's also done a TED Talk titled Why I'm Done Trying to Be Man Enough, which discussed how performative masculinity prevents men from being their true selves, and the harmful stereotypes that young men are told to subscribe to from an early age. For example, men are told they're not allowed to cry or express emotion, and his talk is all about that. He also uses the profits from Wayfarer Studios to host events such as the Skid Row Carnival of Love, which is an annual carnival with games and kids areas and stuff like that you would find at a carnival. But then it also has stations with like secondhand clothing, toiletries, books, toys, a spa where homeless people can have showers, haircuts, etc. And then the event pairs volunteers one-on-one with a participating homeless person, so they can like go through the carnival together and just connect on a human level as well. Some other cool services that are at the Carnival of Love: there are doctors there who can do blood tests and first aid, but also do HIV testing. There's people from non-profit organizations that connect homeless people to potential housing and services. The DMV attends so that people can get ID, because that's a big issue with people experiencing homelessness, is if they don't have ID, then they can't get a job, and if they can't get a job, then they can't get a home. And then at the end, there's like this big barbecue and everyone eats together. Yeah, it sounds like a pretty incredible event. He's also written some books. He's written one titled Man Enough, Undefining My Masculinity, and then another one titled Boys Will Be Human, which is a self-help book for young boys to address self-esteem and communication. And again, like, disclaimer, I haven't read or watched, listened to any of his work aside from his TED Talk, so he could just be really good at writing captions. But do you see what I mean? Like, this guy, I mean, talk about For someone who barely has any information about themselves on the internet, talk about a fucking top tier digital footprint. Did I mention that he's also like conventionally attractive and he's a family man? You know, he married Emily Fuxler, who is a Swedish actress, and they have 2 kids together. And then fun fact, when Emily was first pregnant, they both were very interested in making like a time-lapse video of her growing belly, but they found it really difficult, time-consuming, and you know, also with everything going on when you're pregnant, they would just forget to film each day or take a photo each day for the time lapse. And so he founded an app with 2 of his friends which can be used to create a time lapse of a growing belly so that you can have a nice documentation of this special time. Like, is he too good to be true? I don't know. But this feud we're talking about today seems to be this man's first ever controversy that has like made it to public media. So I will be keeping a close eye on him. Nikki's keeping her eye on Selena. I'm keeping my eye on Justin Baldoni because obviously I hope he is genuinely just a great person, and like it would be fucking awesome to have someone that empowers men to advocate for women. But the Capricorn pessimist in me is like preventing me from believing that he's all that, and I'm very suspicious. So I will be keeping my eyes peeled, and I hope that you will also be doing the same. Let's talk about the It Ends With Us book, because this movie is based on the book, like I mentioned, by Colleen Hoover. I haven't read the book. I haven't read any of Colleen Hoover's books actually. I've seen too many mixed reviews, and I don't know if I ever will read any of her stuff because I've just been seeing some questionable things online. But to give you the rundown, the book was first released 2016, and it centers on a college graduate called Lily Bloom who moves to Boston to start a flower shop. And Lily grew up with an abusive father, and you know, she's resented him for that, but she also has some resentment for her mom who decided to stay with him. And as she's running this flower shop, she meets Ryle, who is a neurosurgeon, and the 2 fall in love. The start of the relationship is very good, very romantic, but then Ryle does start to display abusive behaviors, and these continue to escalate throughout their relationship. And I guess spoilers ahead, skip forward 30 seconds if you don't want to know how the story ends, but Lily basically endures the abuse until she finds out that she is pregnant. And then the book ends with Lily telling Ryle, like, it ends with us, you know, meaning the cycle of abuse will not continue with their child because she's grown up in an abusive environment herself and she doesn't want that for her own child, but she does co-parent with Ryle. Even though the book came out in 2016, in 2021 it had a massive resurgence when it started trending on TikTok, or BookTok as the book side of TikTok is called. Colleen Hoover actually wrote the book based on her mother's relationship with her father, and described that this book, for those very personal reasons, was one of the hardest ones she's ever had to write. And one of her earliest memories of her father is him throwing a TV at her mum. And when Colleen was 2, her mum did leave her father and the abusive relationship, and Colleen recalls how strong her mum was after the relationship and how inspired she was by this strength. I watched some interviews of her from last year, and she's very good at opening up about the book's darker themes, and she says that she really wants to use her platform to shine light on this very important issue. Now, in spite of this, when the book first came out, and then again when it had its second resurgence in 2021, there were a lot of controversies. People were saying that Colleen's way of writing about abuse romanticizes toxic relationships. People criticized her for getting her book to appeal to mass audiences with such heavy themes then being marketed to kids. People criticized her for creating women characters that are there to like fix their male love interests. Yeah, some people say she's glamorizing sensitive themes. Others argue that Colleen is simply shedding light to real life issues and sparking conversation. And I unfortunately don't have an opinion because, like I said, I just haven't read any of her work. Now, in terms of her being accused of romanticizing abuse and things like that, I will say the books are marketed as romance novels, which I think is maybe not quite right when you think about, I mean, I guess there is romance in it, but it's also not a love story. Do you know what I mean? Even the wiki wiki description for the It Ends With Us book is it's a romance novel. And then in 2016, it won the Goodreads Choice Award for Best Romance. The book cover as well is like got a lot of flowers on it. It looks very like a romantic story. And then the way people interact with it as well, you know, I remember seeing TikToks of people reading this in 2021, and it was like a beach read. Like people would have it while they were lounging next to a pool. And before I knew anything about the story, like this is the type of book that I possibly would have picked up at an airport, do you know what I mean? And not expected to be hit with this very dark storyline. So for this reason, some people have said that the book was incredibly triggering because they just had no indication that they'd picked up a book about domestic violence. And yeah, I don't know, is that Colleen's fault? Is that her marketing team's fault? I have to say, like from the outside looking in, it is very much giving romance novel, but I'm not sure like if she's the one who decides how this is defined. That would potentially be more on her publishing team. In 2023, this book also had a very public controversy when Colleen announced that they were going to release an It Ends With Us coloring book, which is wild. And I get that there was a massive coloring resurgence at the time, you know, it was all part of the cozy girl aesthetics, healing your inner child, etc., but what the fuck? How do you make a coloring book out of a story that's about domestic violence? Now, because of all of this backlash and controversy, she did end up pulling the coloring book thing, so it was never published. And her publishers also released a statement saying that, you know, they wanted the coloring book to be uplifting and empowering, like Lily Bloom's story, but that they will not be moving forward with publication. But yeah, it's very tricky to tell. You know, I've seen people praise and criticize Colleen for how she portrays abusive relationships. So I would say my gut feeling is that when she wrote It Ends With Us, it was not her intention to romanticize abuse. And the reason I say that is because of the very personal ties that this book has to her mom and to her dad and to her own upbringing, you know, those early memories that she has of her dad. So I think you'd have to be an incredibly twisted human being to then romanticize your like mom's own abuse story. Do you know what I mean? In 2022, Colleen was caught up in another scandal when a Twitter user commented on a thread saying that Colleen's son had sexually harassed her, and then Colleen had blocked her when she tried to speak to her about it. In a second tweet, this girl elaborated that Colleen's son Levi and her were friends on Snapchat, and they would message each other back and forth, and she was 16 at the time and he was 21. And she also says he was very aware of her age because, you know, she would talk to him about school, and that one day he then asked her for a nude picture, and this obviously made her feel very uncomfortable. And when she tried to contact Colleen about it, she alleges that Colleen blocked her, which is obviously horrific and like not the right response. And I get it's like tricky when it's your son, but you do have a duty of care, I guess, in a way. And yeah, I guess it was just seemed extra hypocritical to people online because of the way that she writes about abuse and stuff in her books. Now, Colleen did respond to this, but she responded on a private Facebook group that is like only for her fans. So it was a sus audience choice. But in this group, she made this following statement. Things being said about my son aren't accurate. People are commenting that I blocked a girl for informing me that my son sexually assaulted her when she was 16. This absolutely did not happen, and this is not even initially what was said by this person. My son and a girl were online friends for several months. They never met in person. He said something to her in a message that made her uncomfortable. He asked her to send him a pic, so she messaged me about it. I did not read this message, but she thought I did, and it understandably upset her that I didn't respond. She then posted on Twitter that my son asked her for a pic. As soon as I found out about this months ago, I reached out to her. We discussed what happened. I apologized to her and thanked her for bringing this to my attention. And I offered to send her our home address and lawyer info should she want it. I held my son accountable for sending a message to her that was inappropriate. I addressed it directly with her and with my son. But why was the girl blocked? Was the girl blocked? I don't know. It is a bit weird, and also weird to me again that she made this statement in like a private group with only her fans in it, that like obviously she's not going to receive any kind of negative comments on it but I am glad that she did address it directly with the girl. Like, I do hope that what she said is all true and that she talked to her son, held him accountable, talked to the girl, made sure she was okay. And yeah, I hope that she didn't block her. I hope that she genuinely didn't see the message and there was some kind of mix-up. So before this even was turned into a movie, It Ends With Us was already a hot topic, already very controversial. And understandably, when the book was announced to be made into a movie, people kind of had mixed feelings about it. So now let's get into the feud. A couple things that I think are important to mention before we get into it. This feud is alleged. Like, Blake and Justin themselves haven't confirmed that they are feuding, so there is a chance that this is all internet-driven drama or internet speculation. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that there really is two things going on at once here. We've got the allegations that Justin and Blake had disagreements in the production of the film and that they're feuding. And then the second thing is that we have criticism for the way that this film has been marketed or the way that the press tour has been playing out. So how did this movie come about to be? In July 2019, Justin Baldoni actually optioned the book for a film adaptation through Wayfarer Studios. It fits very well with his Wayfarer brand, using media to shine light on social issues. And so it's quite unsurprising to me that he had an interest in adapting this book into a movie. I was surprised to find out that this was all happening in 2019, which was before that major TikTok resurgence in 2021. So because it was going to be done through Wayfarer Studios, Justin was going to be one of the producers, but then he also wanted to be the director of the film because he felt quite passionate about the project. And then he eventually also cast himself as Ryle, who is the character that ends up being abusive to Lily Bloom. Some people are like, oh, that's sus. Why would he want to play an abuser? I personally don't think it's that sus. He's passionate about the project. He wants to be involved. It's a complex character. I just didn't think that was that weird. It actually wasn't his idea right off the bat to cast himself in this role. His assistant apparently read the book and was like, oh, you should play Ryle. You'd make a really good Ryle. And then when he was emailing Colleen Hoover, when they were discussing whether he could get the rights to make a movie out of this, and he was speaking to her quite passionately about the book and how much the story meant to him, she actually also suggested to him, well, have you considered acting in the film? I think you could make a good Ryle. And so because two people had brought it up to him, he was like, oh, well, maybe I could do that, even though obviously directing and starring in a movie simultaneously is a lot of work, but he said he was up for the challenge. In 2023, Blake was cast as Lily Bloom, and then she was also brought on as a producer to the film as well. And immediately this sparked controversy, mainly because of her age, because Lily Bloom in the book is meant to be 23, I think, but Colleen kind of said age is a bit irrelevant to this story. She doesn't see Lily's age being integral to her character or to the storyline, because essentially the whole point is this could happen to anyone. And then another thing that received a lot of criticism, particularly when photos of them on set started coming out, was Blake's character's wardrobe, which I will say it's incredibly eccentric, and I'm not sure if that's how her character is described in the books. Maybe it is. Definitely the wardrobe it's out there to say the least. Later, Brandon Sklenner was cast as Atlas. His character is Lily's childhood sweetheart that she reconnects with while she's dating Ryle. And then the production did have to pause during the 2023 Writers Guild of America strike. Despite this, the film was completed and set to release August 9th, 2024. Right off the bat, people on the internet are speculating that there is some tension between Blake and Justin. And this is because they're just not really seen together. Justin kind of seems to be on his own little press tour that's quite isolated from the rest of the cast. There's no photos of him with the rest of the cast. There's no photos of him with Colleen. There's no photos of him with Blake. Meanwhile, Blake is hanging out with all the other cast members. She is heavily featuring Colleen on her Instagram, doing a lot of red carpet photos with everyone, the whole shebang. And this just kind of starts to spark some rumors that maybe there's is a bit of a rift between Justin and Blake. Some of the cast members are still talking about Justin in interviews, even though he's not there with them, commending him for his work on the film. Like, I think Brendan, who plays Atlas, commends Justin as a director, saying he did a very great job. But Blake is like skirting questions to do with him, and she's also refusing to say his name. Like, she occasionally refers to him as the director, which is just odd because it's like he's not some like nameless director. Like, he was also her scene partner, like he was working alongside her. And then another cast member, Jenny Slate, she plays Ryle's sister. She was asked what it was like to work with Justin and have him as a scene partner and a director at the same time, and she's like, oh my god, what an intense job. I mean, it made me realize I only ever want to do one job at a time, and I've got so much passion for writing, but man, when I was watching him do that, I was just like, wow, yeah, I'm good with just acting for now. Like, I'm good with just working one job at a time. So she doesn't at all answer the question, which was, what was it like to work with Justin? And instead just focuses on the fact that he was acting and directing, and it was just like, whoa, what a crazy job. That was a bit of an odd response for sure. And then people start to realize that none of the main cast or Colleen Hoover follow Justin on Instagram, which is weird because he follows them, but they just don't follow him back. And not only is Justin following everyone on Instagram, he's also speaking very highly of Blake when he's asked about her. Like, he's not skirting questions about her. In one interview, he describes her as a creative force, a genius. He says that she was involved in every aspect of this production and that everything she touched, she made better. So it's like, what's going on here? Like, is the feud one-sided? Is he just that shady that like behind the scenes he like stirs all this shit and then he comes out publicly and is like saying all the right things? Because we've covered someone else like that. We've covered Drake before, so maybe it's that kind of a situation. But it's definitely odd because in May, Justin was seen with the other cast members and he did like a bunch of interviews with Colleen Hoover, and he was on her Instagram and she was on his. So it's like the fact that she doesn't follow him, definitely feel like she would have been following him previously. So amid all of this speculation, sources come out saying that the reason for this fracture in the press tour is because of creative differences between Justin and Blake in the post-production process, and that the creative differences were so bad that like 2 different cuts of the movie emerged, and then allegedly it was Blake's preferred cut that ended up being the final cut. And if this is true, then that is extremely odd because Justin is the director, and even though she is on the film not just as an actor but also as a producer, it's normally still the director who has the final cut. Some people say she commissioned Shane Reed, who was also an editor on Deadpool and Wolverine, which is the movie that her husband Ryan Reynolds stars in. And Shane Reed also cut the Taylor Swift music video that Blake directed. And so some people say that she commissioned him, like someone who's close to her and her husband, who she's worked with before, to create, her cut of the film. I will say he is not the one credited for the final cut, so I'm not sure how true that is. Another source actually dispels these rumors, saying that like with any film there were multiple cuts made and then the production team as a whole agreed on the final. And Justin also acknowledged that Blake did have a lot of contributions to the film, but not in like a negative way. He said he quite often will take a step back to let women working on his film take charge, because this particular story is told from a woman's perspective, and so he really wanted to make sure that it was shot from the female gaze, and to do that it was important for him that the women working on the project could speak up and could voice their opinions, and he would listen. And Blake has also spoken at lengths about all the contributions she made to the film. She says she had a level of authorship and that she was very passionate and loves getting involved whenever she's acting, and that she as an actor isn't someone who can like come in, put on whatever wardrobe, speak whatever dialogue and then make it work. Like, she says that as an actor she needs to be a bit more involved in what's going on. She needs to contribute to her dialogue, to the set, to the wardrobe, and then her acting can come to life through that. In a video that's kind of going viral, she reveals that she had, creative control of some of the music that was in the movie, and that she fought quite hard to have Lana Del Rey's song Cherry during a specific scene. And she doesn't say who, but she just says they told me to take that out and I had to really fight them on it to keep it in. And I don't know, I was too distracted thinking like, oh my god, I can't believe Cherry's gonna get fucking TikTokified. best. You guys know I'm such a Lana stan, and like obviously I want what's best for her and her music, but I'm like, why does her song have to be in this bombshell of a movie? Anyway, Blake's also spoken up that a lot of the clothes that we see Lily Bloom wear are like directly from her wardrobe, or her husband Ryan Reynolds' wardrobe, or her friend Gigi Hadid's wardrobe. So she brought a lot into this movie. And then she also says that she even played a role as an intimacy coordinator. They did also have other intimacy coordinators on the set, because you know, you can't coordinate your own intimacy with another character. Like, it's always best to have that come from a third party. But she just says that she also gave some direction there as well. So, and again, she's a producer on the film. Like, it's not necessarily outside of her scope, but it does really strongly come across that she was super involved. And you know, Justin's also said she was super involved, not in a bad way, but you know, they can't have agreed on everything. And I kind of believe this theory that there were creative differences between them, because since the press rollout, we've seen two very different styles of marketing to promote the same film. We have two very different movie posters for the film. You know, one of them, it's very drama-esque, like it's very typical of like a drama film. And then we have the other one, the more popular one that we're familiar with, which has Blake and a bunch of flowers on it. So it's kind of giving off more of that romance movie vibes. We also have different trailers, one that focus more on the darker themes of the film, and then one that doesn't really touch on them at all, and one that comes across as a drama, and the other one that comes across as a romance. And then we have two very different styles of press interviews, particularly between Justin and Blake. So Justin, he's making it incredibly clear that he wants to center or to focus on the domestic violence and abuse themes of the film. In an interview on the red carpet with E.T., the interviewer says to him, like, you know, congratulations, this is your night, you know, meaning like he's the director, he's also starring in it, like he made this film happen, this is his night. And he says, no, this isn't my night. This is for all the women who we made this movie for. This is a night for Blake. This is a night for Colleen. God, I hate this guy. He's just too damn perfect. In a separate interview, he's asked, what will you remember being most special about having to both direct and star in the film? And he says, what comes to mind isn't so much about the work that went into it, but about the why behind it. The why was that if a Lily Bloom in real life can sit in this theater and maybe make a different choice for herself than was made for her. Maybe she sees herself on that screen and she leaves the theater and chooses something different for herself. That's why I made the movie. Again, stellar answer. We have this repetitive thing where, you know, they're trying to celebrate him, they're trying to focus the interview on his directing, his role, this being his night, and he's constantly pulling focus back to, no, this is about domestic violence, this is to highlight abuse that happens, and the main message of this film is for people to make a change, you know? In another interview on CBS Mornings, the presenters introduce his character as someone who seems like a nice guy but turns out to be abusive. Again, there's like this focus on the heavier themes. He's talking about how heavily the book impacted him and how he really wanted to make the movie to shine light on this difficult topic, and he was very afraid initially about his own biases in making the film because he's a man, but that he wants to shift the way that everyone, but predominantly men, understand abusive relationships. He says, the question that's always asked is, why did she stay? And that's the wrong question. We need to be asking ourselves, why do men harm? And you know, in this interview, he's also wearing a pin from the organization No More, which focuses on combating domestic and sexual violences. He also mentions that he collaborated very closely with this organization to ensure that he was portraying the themes correctly. So very reminiscent of his cystic fibrosis film that he also made. And then when he was asked about what men specifically should take away from this movie, he said, you know, accountability, men holding each other accountable, and he wants men that go to the theater and watch this film to recognize how important it is for them to heal from their own traumas, from their own pasts, so that they don't pass that trauma onto the people in their lives. And yeah, he hopes it inspires them to want to be better and to take action. So he's just having like very picture perfect answers to every single question. I mean, I think he's going about this in a very tasteful way, and you can just tell he really is trying to push the focus of people, not on how awesome it is that he was able to direct and act. Wow, that's so amazing. He's like, no, we're here to like deliver a message. But again, throughout the whole press tour, he's just not hanging out with the rest of the cast. Like, he's mostly seen with his wife, family, but not with the other cast members, and certainly not with Blake. Now, people are very quick to juxtapose how Justin is talking about this film with how Blake and some of the other cast members, and even the like official social accounts for the It Ends With Us movie, are promoting the film, which is quite different. So in one interview, Blake is asked about her floral fashion that she's wearing throughout the press tour, because playing Lily Bloom, a florist, she's kind of harnessing her character through her outfits on the press tour, you know, and she's saying yes, she's having so much fun and it's been very cool to bring out all her florals, and she like thanks the interviewer for also wearing florals. And even the official It Ends With Us social account, it's like posting these fan reactions of people who have seen the film, and they post one where the fan is like, it's fun, it's romance, there's hot guys, there's hot girls, there's sobbing, there's crying, there's love, it's got everything you want. Which is an intriguing review and like very much, you know, makes you want to go watch the movie, but it just doesn't quite encompass what the film is about. Like, if you watch that, you wouldn't even know that this is a story about domestic violence. And I think I need to stress here, this isn't a romance movie that has like one scene about domestic violence in it. Like, this is a book that Colleen wrote to platform the issue based on her own experiences and the experiences of her mum. It's a book that Justin read and then wanted to turn into a movie again to platform the issue. Like, this isn't a film where domestic violence is in it. Like, domestic violence is a key message of the film. This account was posting fan reactions, and they can't exactly tell their fans how they're meant to react, but I don't know, why would you choose that one to post? I would have just gone with a different review that maybe gave a more accurate description of what's in the film. Another video posted by the It Ends With Us movie account has Colleen and Blake, and they're like, I'm Colleen Hoover and I'm Blake Lively, and the movie is out now, so grab your friends and wear your florals and go watch the movie. Which tonally, it's just not right. Like, this was the opportunity to say, you know, the movie is out and we are so excited to shed light and platform a very important issue that isn't talked about enough, or, you know, that people aren't aware about enough. That could have been the drawing card that they bring to get you to watch the film. But saying like, grab your friends and wear your florals to go to a movie about domestic violence, it just doesn't seem right. In another interview, Blake is asked, like, people are going to relate to this in a very personal level. What's the best way for people who relate to the topics in this movie to reach out to you? And she says, oh, like, are they asking for my address or my phone number or location share? I could location share, which is like, what a disappointing response. The interviewer was asking a very valid question, because yeah, you're making a movie that is about an experience that unfortunately a lot of people have real life experiences with. What's the best way for those people to reach out to you? It's like, you don't get to capitalize on this issue and then be like, oh, does everyone just want my address now? I think the worst part is when Blake Lively used the It Ends With Us promo to spotlight her RTD company that I mentioned earlier, Betty Booze. She was making like fun Betty Booze pairings that are based on each character. So for Lily Bloom, you can pair a Betty Booze sparkling tequila lemonade with popcorn. Or for Atlas, you could pair a bourbon apple ginger sour cherry with an ice cream. And if none of those piqued your interest, you could always go for Ryle's pairing, which is sparkling tequila lime shiso with Sour Patch Sweets. It's just not, I mean, when I saw it, I was like, this has to be AI. Like, there's no way that she actually used this movie, again, about domestic violence, to promote her RTD company. She then also came out with a line of It Ends With Us themed cocktails. She had the Blooming Betty, the Tom Colleens, Ryle You Wait, and It Ends With Buzz. How fucking whack is this? Like, there is a time and place, sister, and this is not it. It's already kind of giving me an off feeling that she's using the attention from this movie that has very heavy themes to promote her own businesses. But specifically an alcohol line is just crazy to me, because as most people know, alcohol has such a massive link to domestic violence. A lot of aggressors are under the influence when they are abusing people, and on top of that, that a lot of victims of domestic violence have reported that as part of a way to cope with the abuse was for them themselves to also turn to alcohol. So alcohol just has a very nasty role to play when it comes to domestic violence. And so then making these like fun little Blooming Betty cocktails based on this particular movie is just crazy to me. And then of course in the middle of all of this, because spotlighting Betty Booze wasn't enough, she also launches a brand new hair care line, Blake Brown. Do we really need another product from you? Like, do you really need more? It just seems so excessive to me. It's just pulling focus from the main message of the film. It's almost like she's doing everything she can to bury the message. Another thing that Blake was heavily criticized for is the way that Ryan was so heavily involved, Ryan Reynolds, her husband, so heavily involved in the movie. So in one of the interviews, she reveals that Ryan rewrote one of the scenes in the movie. She refers to it as the iconic rooftop scene. She says they very often work on each other's projects, and she says Ryan is all over this film, and I'm just struggling to see like what expertise or what extra element Ryan can bring to a film like this, because you've got Justin directing and he's very clearly made it his personal mission to speak out about women's rights and hold men accountable for things like domestic violence and abuse. So it's just odd to me that we needed Ryan Reynolds to write one of the iconic rooftop scenes. And then it's also weird because Christy Hall, who is the screenwriter for the movie, she didn't even know that Ryan had rewritten the scene. I mean, she's pretty nonchalant when she's asked about it in the interview. She says, oh yeah, like I noticed there were some changes. I just thought it was Blake improvising, but if Ryan did it, then that's great and wonderful. And I'm just like, good for you, girl, because I would have been fuming, like, how dare that man touch my work, like pull out his red pen and just go and do some editing. He doesn't even go here. He's not even meant to be a part of this movie. Some people have also done the maths, and I don't know how they've come to this conclusion, but apparently Ryan would have been writing or rewriting the rooftop scene during the writer's strike. So not great. And then the other, as if enough attention wasn't already being pulled from domestic violence, what makes it worse is that we have this Deadpool Wolverine interference in the middle of the It Ends With Us press tour. And this is because Deadpool vs. Wolverine, that movie came out I think a week before It Ends With Us, and so Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively, they were doing a lot of these red carpet things at the same time. And so she actually brings Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds along to the press tour. And look, I'm all for supporting your wife and supporting your friends or whatever, but it's just weird because these two movies tonally are very different. And Blake is doing photo ops with Hugh and Ryan, and she's wearing an archival Versace dress that Britney Spears very famously wore, and people feel like her and Ryan are trying to fabricate like a Barbenheimer moment between It Ends With Us and Deadpool and Wolverine, and it's just not working because Barbenheimer only really worked because people came up with it. The internet made that a thing. It doesn't work if the people making money off the movies are driving that. Do you know what I mean? All of this noise, Ryan being there, Ryan and Hugh running around with Blake in the Britney Spears dress, all of this is just pulling a lot of focus from the movie's message. And then I think the weirdest interview that I've ever seen comes out of this. It's on Ryan Reynolds' Instagram. I'll probably link it on my Instagram, Mood for Feud. It's like a skit. So in this skit, Ryan comes in to interview Brandon Sklenner, who plays Atlas, and he's accusing Brandon of trying to steal Blake, but then halfway through he realizes that Brandon's actually a really cool guy, and it ends with them hugging. And then Ryan Reynolds' mom comes in and she's accusing him of trying to steal her daughter-in-law from her son, but then realizes he's cool and ends up flirting with him. And then Ryan comes back in and asks Brandon if he can be his new dad. And then Hugh Jackman comes in and accuses Brandon of trying to steal his best friend Ryan Reynolds, but then Hugh Jackman realizes Brandon's really cool, and then at the end they're all wearing the same sweatshirt as Brandon. It's meant to be funny, but again, it's just not the right place and time for this movie. It's also just very weird. It's very creepy. Truly no one asked for this. Now, I will say, amidst all of this, the internet is very quick to start dogpiling on Blake. A lot of old interviews resurface, even print interviews from 2008 or whatever, from a very long time ago, start making the rounds on TikTok, on Instagram. Suddenly everyone has a story about Blake being terrible to work with or being terrible to meet and being rude to fans. And do I think she should be criticized for the press tour of this film? Yes, absolutely. I think this is a learning opportunity. I think it's a wake-up call to other celebrities who want to embark on a topic with heavy themes. But it didn't quite sit right with me, even though, I told you my early feelings on the feud right at the top. But it just didn't quite sit right the way that suddenly everything she did was wrong. Like, people were analyzing every single thing this woman has ever said. I think that's a bit unfair. That's escalating this further than it needs to. And we need to be focusing on what she's doing right now. Like, criticize her for the alcohol thing. Criticize her for the hair care line, There's enough things to criticize her for just right here, right now. Like, we don't need to make her relive a flippant comment she made in 2006. Now, what was also interesting about this whole press tour debacle was how quickly there was a lot of damage control. The PR machines were PRing, and it made it even trickier to tell what is actually going on, because suddenly we had this flood of articles that were very deliberately trying to manipulate or skew the internet discourse. Like, for example, I saw 3 different accounts on different social platforms that were, posting articles, and the captions were word for word the same, which to me kind of just says they've been fed this, someone said to them, hey, post this on your account. There's suddenly a massive resurgence, Facebook accounts particularly, recapping all the times Blake and Ryan were couple goals in Hollywood, so odd timing for that to start coming out. We also start seeing clips from Justin talking about, how challenging it can be as a filmmaker to navigate complex personalities, but that there's always friction that happens when you make a movie like this. And then at the end of the day, it's that friction that creates this beautiful art. So he's kind of dispelling these rumors that there were creative differences, saying no, tension is great for a film. That's what makes the movie. We've got the Sony chief praising Blake Lively for advancing the conversation around domestic violence, which I'm like, how is she doing that? Because I haven't seen any of that. But we also get some very direct responses to the criticism online. You can almost match them up like a little puzzle. So for example, people were criticizing that Blake isn't acknowledging the domestic violence aspects of the film and focusing too much on just the florals and the romance and it all being fun and happy. And then Blake posts some facts and statistics about domestic violence on her Instagram story, and also posts a bunch of resources for hotlines and things that you can call if you are experiencing domestic violence. We suddenly get flooded with interview clips where Blake is saying, people are multitudes, there are so many aspects to them, and that in the same way, Lily's experience with domestic violence doesn't define her, because she's a woman of multitudes and there is more to her than just what she went through. She actually posts one of these interview clips on her story and then captions that, "Thank you to everyone who came out to show that people want to see films about women and the multitudes we hold." She keeps using this word multitudes. She uses it in 3 or 4 different interviews. In one of them, she is asked, what is the message of the film? And she says, "I'm not minimizing anything, but you're so much more than just a survivor or just a victim. Well, that is a huge thing. You are a person of multitudes, and what someone has done to you doesn't define you. You define you, and what you have in you and what you're capable of and what you have done and are doing and will do is so much bigger, and that is so empowering. This is a story that covers domestic violence, but it's not about domestic violence. It's about this woman." And look, I agree. Yes, of course, people who have experienced domestic violence are more than that one thing. And of course, they're multifaceted or multitudes or whatever it is that she's saying. But she hasn't spoken about the domestic violence at all, except for that, 1 or 2 Instagram stories where she quickly posted some facts because of all the criticism she was receiving. And I just think it's weird, for someone saying women are multitudes, her entire press run has been one note. And I get that this is a red carpet event. Have fun. Wear your pretty outfits. Take pictures with your husband, who also has a movie coming out, but also spend some of that time spreading the message of the film. Share some stories that will get people to connect to the message. Highlight organizations that people can go to for for help, or organizations that people can donate to if they are touched by the content of the film. Like, you can do both. You can have fun, wear florals, hang out with Hugh and Ryan, and you can platform domestic violence. And by platforming this issue, I don't think anyone is going to come away thinking, oh, if you've experienced domestic violence, that's all there is to you. I don't think she needs to be scared that that's the message that it's going to send. And then another like direct link is, there's been criticism that Ryan is way too involved with the movie. And then we get this quote circulating online from Ryan saying, "It's always been the one kind of constant with Blake and I is that we really root for each other." He's pushing back on that criticism, saying like, Blake and I are a very supportive couple. Though the internet is very pro-Justin and there's a lot of criticism of Blake and Ryan, there are kind of these murmurings, I guess, that there is potentially more that we don't know about. I guess the first blaring obvious sign of this is that the whole main cast and Colleen Hoover don't follow Justin, which is kind of like an indication that there's potentially something shady that we don't know about, something that happened behind the scenes. There's a lot of internet discourse that this could potentially be because of Blake and Ryan's influence in Hollywood, and that a lot of people just don't want to get on their bad side for fear of losing out on work. There's rumors floating around that it's because Blake is favored to produce and direct the sequel, and so the cast want to stay on her good side to make sure that they get recast in that movie. Justin was actually asked on the red carpet, are you going to come back for the sequel to It Ends With Us? Like, we'd love to see you directing and acting in it again. And he's kind of like, maybe someone else should direct that one. Like, I think Blake is ready to direct, which is a nice thing to say. He says it in a genuine way, but knowing what we've kind of covered with this allegation that they had creative differences, like, it could also be shady. Like, Blake's ready to direct because she basically tried to direct the first one. Another sign that everything might not be as it seems is that Liz Plank, she is the co-host to Justin Baldoni's podcast Man Enough, and she's also friends with Blake. She is only sharing photos of Blake Lively on her social media. In this highly political climate, that is saying something. We've got a TikTok sleuth, Jenna Redfield. She was one of the first TikTokers to start documenting that Justin and Blake were feuding. She comes out with this weird video saying like, I'm not going to talk on this topic anymore, and there's some stuff that's going to come to light very soon, which is like ominous. Was she paid to say that? Is there actually just stuff coming out? Did someone shoulder tap her like, hey girl, you might want to stop slamming Blake because we're about to get some Justin tea? And then Brandon Sklenar, he comes out with this massive written statement on his Instagram, and this reads, I wanted to take a minute and address all the stuff swirling online. Colleen and the women of this cast stand for hope, perseverance, and for women choosing a better life for themselves. Vilifying the women who put so much of their heart and soul into making this film because they believe so strongly in its message seems counterproductive and detracts from what this film is about. It is in fact the opposite of the point. What may or may not have happened behind the scenes does not, and hopefully should not, detract from what our intentions were in making this film. It's been disheartening to see the amount of negativity being projected online. And he just goes on to say like the film is meant to inspire, it's meant to validate and recognize, and ultimately the film is meant to spread love and awareness. It is not meant to once again make the women the bad guy. Let's move beyond that together. That statement made me think like, there is something that they're not telling us. But I have to kind of also say, applying the it's dangerous not to believe women sentiment from domestic violence to use it as a defense for Blake Lively is kind of crazy. And this is what I meant with there's two different things going on here, right? Like there's the feud between Blake and Justin, and then there's the criticism that Blake is receiving for the way that she is promoting the movie. And I think regardless of whether Justin is a good man or not, whether he was terrible to work with or awful on set, or whether there's some other shit that we don't know about, regardless of all of that, I don't think it undoes any of the criticism that Blake is receiving for the promoting of the film. It's wrong for her to detract from the film's main message. It's wrong for her to market this movie as a fun rom-com to go watch with your girly pops. It's wrong of her to to use it as an opportunity to platform Betty Boo's and alcohol brand. None of that in my mind is undone if we find out that Justin was also in the wrong. Now, amidst all of this, Justin also hires a PR crisis manager, Melissa Nathan. She is the same crisis manager who worked with Johnny Depp on the Amber Heard trial, that whole fiasco, which tells me something is coming. Like, he's getting his defenses ready. We are already seeing a couple of pieces coming out of mainly TMZ, Daily Mail, and Page 6, so like, unfortunately not the most reputable sites, but we are seeing reports Justin made Blake uncomfortable on set, that he lingered during some of the kissing scenes, and that he is incredibly difficult to work with, and that none of the cast enjoyed working with him, not just Blake. So it was like he was the problem, not her. So maybe there's more to the story. I'm certainly going to be keeping my eyes peeled because, as we know, with the way that news moves in the internet, in another week or so, this whole thing will be history and no one's even going to be thinking about it. So we're going to have to all be on the lookout to catch if any other information, particularly about Justin or about his relationship with the rest of the cast, comes to light. It feels like we're missing something here. So before we wrap up, because I feel like I've been talking for forever, a couple of important takeaways on this feud. Number one, I don't think Blake is like calculated or malicious in what she's doing. Like, I truthfully just think she is a bit of a dummy. I think she's been living in this cushy world, surrounded by cushy problems, and she's out of touch, you know, and we've seen that in other aspects of her life, that she's not the best at being socially aware. And maybe this is just a good indicator that A-list celebrities like Blake, maybe they aren't the best ones to be in films with heavy topics or themes. It would be tricky as an A-list celebrity, nepo baby, living in this very comfortable life, very different life. It would be hard to appropriately talk on difficult topics. But again, I think there is likely more to the story, and I do find it odd that the whole cast has unfollowed Justin. I think it just shows that there could be some other things that we don't know about. This feud is almost not Justin versus Blake. It's like Justin versus everybody else. And I think it's also unrealistic in this feud for there to be like a very clear villain and a very clear hero. Like, probably both of these people are morally grey. I find it sus that Justin's digital footprint is like nothing but angels, flowers, and sunshine. Like, this man has never made a misstep in his entire life, it seems. If Justin made Blake uncomfortable on set, then that is more than enough reason for her to distance herself from him. And I don't think she needs to grin and bear it on the red carpet for our sake. But as I mentioned, this doesn't undo the fact that she botched the press tour. Unfortunately, the drama or the feud ironically has been another way that this focus has been pulled from the important message at hand. It's almost like a twist of fate, whereby coming after Blake for not caring about the film's heavy themes, we have created this whole fiasco where now no one is really talking about the heavy themes. Everyone's just talking about Blake and Ryan, and yeah. And I do think that the film's message has definitely fallen flat a bit. I don't know if this is one of those you're responsible for your own For You page moments, but the TikToks that I've been seeing of people, you know, reviewing the movie, they're all just thirsting for Ryle or saying shit like they would defend him if they were Lily Bloom, and like... Yeah, I think when the whole cast made this movie, none of them wanted this to be the outcome where people are fucking thirsting for the abuser. But that's the internet for you, and that is Gen Z. And that is also all that I have on this feud. Let me know all your thoughts. Do you think that there's more to this Justin Baldoni fella? Am I just being unfairly suspicious and cynical? Do you think it was fair the way that everyone started dogpiling on Blake Lively? Let me know all your thoughts. I'm on Instagram at Mood for Feud. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate the show. You can also leave a written review on Apple Podcasts, and you can also follow the show so you never miss another episode. But that is all from me today. I hope you guys have a great week. I'm gonna stop talking because I feel like I've lost my voice, but we'll chat again next week. Bye.